Teletherapy often faces skepticism from parents, educators, and even some therapists who believe in-person therapy is superior to online therapy. However, I think all of us would attest that with the right strategies, teletherapy can be just as effective, and I would argue even more so than traditional in-person therapy for many children and adults. Welcome, Telepractice Committee. So we are all here today because we wanted to start sharing about the shifting mindset and expanding awareness of teletherapy, telepractice, telehealth for both kids and adults. And so we have a nice mix of our committee members here today that we are going to each speak to a different area with this. And I thought we would get started with the kid therapy. We came up with kind of a problem statement for children. So let's get into the challenges and mindset barriers for kids teletherapy. Alyssa, would you like to take us away on parents worrying about engagement?
Yes, absolutely. I think all, especially young children, the caregivers are always so worried about what that engagement is going to look like. They're like, my child doesn't sit for very long, my child's very wiggly. What is this going to look like? The first thing that I try to do is address the fact that I don't expect them to sit. That's okay. I expect movement. I expect wiggles. I expect that because we even see that in person. So that will carry. I always tell the caregiver that we're going to meet the child where they're at. For example, if they're not yet at the level where they can attend to a computer screen, then that just means that we have to shift what we're doing and maybe shift into a parent coaching model and have the parents kind of in there, hands-on, boots to the ground, working to use those strategies that we're talking about and implementing those in real time. But I also think there is a huge shift with kids. They love computer games, they love screens, they love that technology aspect. And now technology just grows and grows and grows, and there's so many new resources, so many new features, so many new ways to increase engagement with the screen that I always have what I call my attention grabbers, those things that I put on the screen and get their attention and pull them over. And then those caregivers by the end of the session, I always try to do those reflective questions like, how do you think it went? What are your thoughts? What do you think we could do better for next time? And they're always so surprised at the level of engagement that we got during the session. And it really is always a really positive conversation. So that first session is really my favorite to kind of combat that mindset around that engagement piece.
I love that. So you are really focused in on the quick wins and really demonstrating how powerful telepractice is, even with kids. And what age groups would you say you work with the most? I know you cover the spectrum, but who do you work with most?
I would say I probably work from 2 to 8th grade the most. That is
Wow.
the most I see, yes.
All right, great. Thank you, Alyssa. How about Kendall? Let's talk about educators and administrators. And what do they see as the challenges, or what do we need to overcome with them? You're on mute.
Yeah,
Like we haven't done this for.
I know. So for educators and administrators, something that we see popping up now that we're pushing into school-based therapy as a teletherapist is that there's this kind of myth that teletherapy is inferior to in-person therapy. And this is really a big challenge that we face in pediatrics. And I think we're going to talk later about adults, but I don't see it as much in the adult community or in treating adults. We don't see it as much as it's not a challenge that you're facing as much. But the administrators and the teachers that we're working with often do feel like it is an inferior to in person. But really the data is telling a different story. Teletherapy isn't just effective. In some cases, it's more beneficial, like you were talking about, Genevieve. The school district that I work with is collecting data on efficacy, and there's a growing body of research supporting teletherapy's positive impact. I really think teletherapy helps break down those barriers to access, and it's a special way to get communication partners involved, which ultimately improves those outcomes. So we're really seeing that it is more effective in some cases and is just as beneficial as that in-person therapy. Some SLPs do feel limited by the virtual setting still because they assume it won't be as effective. But the great thing about teletherapy is that you can still do everything you would do as an in-person therapist, in some ways more. Like Alyssa was talking about, there's all these great attention grabbers and kids are more and more drawn to the screen. It's a great way to get parent involvement or communication partner involvement or teacher involvement, and that can make a big impact. Personally, I think teletherapy has really helped me sharpen those kind of parent coaching or communication partner training skills, and that's been a game changer for my kids that I see.
Love that. That's great. Alyssa, is there anything else you want to add to about this creative ways to make therapy fun? Could you maybe give us an example of one of those attention grabbers that you like to use?
Yeah, I love to do a show and tell. So, they're right at home. In my setting, they're at home anyway. And they'll maybe go grab a medal from a sports game, or they'll go grab one of their favorite stuffies and they'll kind of bring that in. And we'll do a little show and tell about that item to kind of break the ice, get to know each other a little bit more. But then also just embedding into their social routine. This is what the client is doing. We're in their home environment. We have access to the caregivers. So even just embedding into something that they're naturally doing throughout the day really does increase that engagement as well. But also, you see, I have a stack of toys behind me because a lot of kids have similar toys in their home environment. So I'll even do kind of a parallel play, joint play through the computer screen. I'll get my potato head out while they have their potato head out, and we'll assemble it together, talking about the body parts, the questions, and everything like that. But of course, I always use those resources like Pink Cat Games, Boom Cards, Ultimate SLP, and then pulling up whatever websites they're interested in, whether that's Minecraft or Sophie's Playhouse, I think is another one, Paw Patrol, just kind of grabbing whatever they like and trying to shape that into our sessions.
Love that. So let's move on to some success stories if we could. Kendall, can we put you on the spot and talk about AAC and telepractice? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about doing AAC, whether it's setting it up or maintaining it. Can you talk a little more about that?
You betcha. I have some pictures if I can share my screen of some real, are you able to see that? Of some real kids in, doing the work. So we do crafts in teletherapy. Here are some of my students. We still do crafts. We made snow. We're still able to kind of incorporate all of those hands-on learning, all of that hands-on learning that you're getting in person with the help of the paraprofessional is sitting here working with the kids as well. We still celebrate Talk Like a Pirate Day, and we are pirates. I love this little guy. And so I get to change my background and I get to be a pirate right along with them. We can use total communication strategies. And here's a picture of a couple of students. And this one is actually has an AAC device. So the rest of these pictures are really using AAC. So we use core vocabulary. I model core with simple activities. So I point to it's up as my background, or I have my device in front of me. I'm modeling. Then the communication partner is also modeling, and we do simple things like the sticker book. And then this next series is the same guy, and he has such a great sense of humor. So we have 3 devices in total. He has his own device. The teacher right here has a device, and then I am using my screen as a device. And so he told me, I have something to say, I'm ready for speech, and we have this nice back and forth. So here again, we're using a boom card like Alyssa mentioned. I'm modeling the core vocabulary. He's selecting it on his device, and he's seeing it being modeled by the teacher and myself. In this slide, I'm pointing to where on my screen because he was telling me about seeing a mouse in his neighborhood or in his house. Hopefully not in his house. But we were able to connect through AAC, and then we were able to share preferences as well. This last one I love the most because he just spontaneously selected goodbye, yes, meaning I'm done with speech, move on. So, the nice thing about teletherapy is that I'm able to model without that expectation, which we know is so important for AAC users. And there's multiple models. And then I'm also able to connect their device to the computer, or the communication partner is able to plug it in so I can see. There's also new, initiatives with kind of integrating AAC more in to make it easier but we're using that a lot, and it's been really fun.
Love that. And I think you touched on a point that I wanted to ask more about, because you're on there virtually and we are in a virtual world, but then there's the paraprofessional there that's also helping to reinforce and to model. So it's giving multiple inputs. And I just think that that's a bonus. That's extra
Exactly.
training.
Exactly. And I also see some kids in their home, and so it's extra training for the parent that's involved also. And there are those tech conversations that we have to have, like let's find our cord and let's plug it in, and there are those tech conversations, but that is the smallest piece. And most everybody, I haven't had a client that's had a hard time or that hasn't ultimately figured out how to do it. And we can, and I get to train the paraprofessional or the parents or the teachers that are implementing it. I push into a classroom, a whole first grade kindergarten classroom full of 20 kids, and I'm able to model AAC, and then the teacher's able to model it on her paper core board, and then the students each have their own devices, and the paraprofessionals are modeling it too. So the not only are students with speech and language needs are getting involved and exposed to that alternative communication, but so are the other students, making it more naturally occurring and more salient to all of the students.
And what a great way to be inclusive,
Yeah, it's
right?
great.
Just showing how it can all work together. That's great. Thank you so much for that, Kendall. It's so
Yeah.
good. Erica, can we talk about
Yeah.
educating parents in schools, and what's the research to back up
Yeah.
teletherapy?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we can kind of work on shifting mindsets towards the effectiveness of it is just to share some of these real life examples of successes that we've seen. Kendall, those are some wonderful anecdotes that you have there. I also have just recently started working with a little guy he's a brand new AAC user. He just got LAMP on his iPad like 2 weeks ago. So we're brand new with this. His mother is obviously with him in the therapy sessions. And so just being able to have that, kind of 100% of the time caregiver training. The parent sees what we're doing to model the targets for the client. She's very easily able to carry those over. We do a lot of play-based, child-led activities. So mom is facilitating play. We're kind of going along with whatever this little guy wants to play with. And mom is in there. She's implementing those core words that we're modeling for her and talking about communication strategies as well. So that's kind of one success story that I'm thinking of that, things like that could be helpful to share with others. Another client that comes to mind, I had a little guy that had a severe phonological disorder, and he had so many phonological processes at the start of therapy. He was very unintelligible. We implemented a cycles approach with him. Within a year or so, he had met all of his targets. He was exhibiting age appropriate speech sound production skills. So just having these personal success stories kind of in your bank to share with caregivers can be really powerful. There's also some research out there that shows the efficacy of teletherapy. There's one article, this was back in 2018, so it's even several years ago now. And so there's more, I'm sure, more beyond this. But there is an article in the American Journal of Speech Language Pathology looking at students with speech sound disorders receiving school-based therapy, both via telepractice and traditional in-person therapy. And the results from that study really didn't indicate that there is a significant difference between traditional in-person therapy and telepractice looking at functional outcomes. So that's some really positive news there. I think another thing to keep in mind too is that, I mean, really, we can still use evidence-based practices for whichever treatment approach we're using in our telepractice sessions. If it's something that requires maybe a more tactile, hands-on approach, we can't reach through the screens, unfortunately, and be providing those things. But that's the opportunity that we get to train the communication partner or the caregiver, and that's only going to help carry over with those skills as well. So those are just some success stories or things to think about there.
Yeah, I love because in traditional therapy, in-person therapy, always bringing in the care partner, it always feels a little weird, or the parent, whoever is there, it all feels a little awkward maybe, but now this is just very
Mhm.
natural. Like, of course, they're the one that's
Yeah,
there that has to help. And so it fosters that
yeah,
collaboration and inadvertent training, which is so
yeah,
wonderful. And that helps us with outcomes no matter what the age we are working
yeah.
with.
And like one of you mentioned earlier, sometimes telepractice might even be better than traditional in-person therapy. And I think that could be because we generally have to have somebody there on the client's end to help facilitate things. And that just helps with training and carryover of the communication
I
partners.
think it's tremendous. So good.
Mhm.
Alyssa, are there any other digital tools, games, movement-based activities, parent coaching? You've covered quite a lot so far. Is there anything else at this moment that stands out to you that you would like to share?
No, I think Erica hit it right on the head with the fact that she said the evidence-based practices, they still apply, even though we're virtual.
Right.
We might be talking to the caregiver, teaching them those kind of buzzwords, teaching them, hey, we're focusing on parallel talk today. Do you remember what parallel talk is? Do we need a quick refresher? Do you feel like you can jump in with the blocks and pick up with that? Okay, he's doing great with parallel talk. He's responding really well to that. Let's build on that and let's start building some anticipation up and being like, ready, set, and then build that wait time before you knock over the tower. So, really, the same strategies we would use in person, but talking through the caregiver with that. And I think, sometimes we have caregivers come to us and they're like, we tried in person speech and all they did was play. And as speech therapists, we know playing is learning, playing is speech. So, on the telehealth end, when you're having the caregiver play, but you're coaching through those strategies, the light bulb moment goes off where you're like, it's not just play. I'm doing so much more than play. I understand the strategies that my previous speech therapist was working on and all of that. So, I love seeing that shift. But I like how Erica said those same evidence-based practices still apply.
Love that. So powerful. Anything else we need to talk about, Erica, with hybrid models with parent involvement or focusing on accessibility?
Yeah, I think kind of the piece left to touch on really is focusing on accessibility and just that telepractice does allow us to reach more clients that are in need of services. Clients that live in maybe rural areas or areas that have a shortage of providers or maybe just a shortage of a certain specialist that they might benefit from. Telepractice can help to fill in those gaps because we're not limited by geography as long as we have the appropriate state licensure, but that's probably a topic for another conversation. But it really kind of helps to broaden the reach that we're able to have. Again, if there's a shortage of providers in an area, or maybe there are barriers around the client being able to actually travel to services. Maybe they don't have reliable transportation, or maybe the family is busy and it's really hard for them just to find that hour or two to go to a speech therapy appointment. Or maybe the client has some mobility issues that make travel hard. So really, telepractice can really just broaden the accessibility of services for a variety of clients.
I love it. So we've covered quite a lot about telepractice and busting some of the myths as far as kid therapy goes. Erica, would you like to give us a little summary of what we covered?
Yeah, so summaries here. Some of the key benefits of telepractice for kids: flexibility and the lack of geographical restrictions there, clients not having to travel for services, being able to fill in the gaps where maybe there's a lack of providers in an area. And telepractice really can be very fun, be very engaging, and just as effective, if not maybe even more effective than traditional in person therapy services.
Love it. So good. Thank you. All right, Remy, it's our turn. We're going to shift the topic a little bit to adults, similar yet different. So, how about Remy? Let's get you to chime in on what are some of the challenges and mindset barriers for adult teletherapy. I
Well,
know.
I think it's very similar. Even though you did touch on it, we are in such a virtual world now. I feel like everyone is so open to it. If they haven't been doing it through, haven't been receiving speech therapy, I'm sure they've had visits from their doctor via telehealth or a counselor. So I think that is opening up, and I think our understanding and use technology has expanded. But I would say that is still, I think, one of the drawbacks and the concerns that sometimes, oh, well, the caregiver might be thinking, oh, the client, their father, uncle, whomever might not be able to access, they're not very tech savvy. But I think the platforms now are so easy to use, and people are using FaceTime, to talk to their grandkids. And so
Right.
I think if we just spend a little time and they have a little bit of backup, they're able to see that, oh, okay, yeah, I can access that. But I feel like that's probably one of the bigger minds is, oh, I don't know if they'll be able to access it via phone or tablet or computer. But I think they
Yeah.
realize the benefits like we have talked about.
So it's been an interesting road. I've been in teletherapy for over 10 years now. And back then, there, a much older generation, strokes have gotten a little younger over these last 10 years, unfortunately. In the beginning, I would say it was much more difficult getting an adult who wasn't super familiar with an online platform. We were on WebEx way back when, and that was a much more complicated platform than what we have for Zoom today. So we had to do a lot more training initially, but what we did is we incorporated learning how to use that platform into therapy. We put it as part of the goal. So it wasn't something separate. We still built language around it. We still worked on articulation. Plus, we added in the motor component of finding, how to activate the toolbar or do different things on it. I know that I use the whiteboard an awful lot, and that's probably the number one reason I'm on Zoom, because that's how I was trained. That's just, I can't live without it. Can you talk a little bit about your technology, Remy, and what your experience is with it with adults?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think whiteboard is my all-time favorite as well because we can just pull that up and just write things down and give them access. And if they can type, they can put something on there as well. And I like that we can pull up the internet. If they're talking about a restaurant, let's pull up that restaurant. Let's look at the menu. What would you like to order? You went and saw a movie, or you want to see this movie, or go through things like that so we can access readily um, all of these things that help us personalize their therapy. So I like it. I'm good with you. I know in the beginning it was a little painstaking to get them to understand, especially way back when. But I think part of that benefit too is because we are in a tech savvy world. Teaching them how to access the computer, use Zoom or use their phone or do whatever it is, you know, communication. They need that today as well.
The other access that I love using Zoom, I use my iPad an awful lot.
Mhm. To reflect.
And I used to always plug in, but now I don't know what changed. I don't know if it was the iPad or the Zoom, but it's super easy to do it wirelessly now. And so I have a variety of apps. I can train them on apps. Like they can have their own iPad in front of them and I can be demonstrating it on the screen. So that's one great tool, one method. And I also use my cell phone quite a lot. I have two gentlemen right now, we're teaching how to dictate on text message
Mhm.
because they can speak good enough, but they can't, they're one handed or their thumbs are too big, whatever the complaint is on text messaging. But that learning how to dictate is a game changer for them. So
Right.
in so many ways, I just think teletherapy is because of our access to the world of the internet. I have one gentleman that loves car auctions and he
Ah,
watches them all the time. So we pull up the latest car auction, we see the most expensive car, and then we build a whole, whatever our goals are that we're working on, we incorporate it. We can write it all on the board. I'm preaching to the choir here.
Mhm.
So, I don't have to convince you guys about teletherapy, but it's nice to have other examples for those in TSHA that's going to be listening to this broadcast.
Exactly. I would say, just like the kids, I think it's fun to be in their environment so they can share because they love to share things in their environment, their homes,
That's great.
their pets, right, is always a big one,
Oh,
or their grandkids, or, family is over and we get to meet them and they come
that's right.
online. So it's opened up a whole new world, I think. It's a great medium.
The access to family, I also think, is a really
Yes.
important point where we would never be able to, get somebody out of state to participate in in-person sessions. But the world of teletherapy, we can now do that. I do a lot of training around the holidays, depending on who's going to be hosting and, talking a lot about aphasia inclusion and how do they set up their house for success. And it's just a better way of advocating for our folks. So
Absolutely.
let's move forward and talk about strategies to change mindset and increase awareness, Remy. Right now, we are fighting in our state to be part of the interstate compact because we feel like we have to prove what teletherapy can do. So let's talk about mindset.
I think yeah, I think that is a shift. I think similar to the kids and maybe the schools and some of the professionals that aren't used to this platform or haven't really used it, they think that it's not the equivalent to, or, it's kind of like the watered down second best. But there are so many studies out there using efficacy treatments via telehealth, and they're showing there is no difference, that it is the same. And oftentimes you're getting a better self-report of the clients like it better, so they're more apt to participate because of all of these benefits that we have been talking about. They can access it, we can actually provide more services to them because sometimes, yeah, it's a once a week is all they can do to come and get to us, but via online or telehealth we can do one or two times, or do a cycles approach, or do something that is more than, one time a week, because it's not going to create that burden. It's just easy enough to just pop it up. And again, we are still doing those strategies. We're still doing the same things that we've learned, the efficacy strategies and treatments. It's just a different medium or platform. So,
Some of the age groups I work with, I work a lot with career individuals. They're in their 50s, they're in the prime of their career. And the only way I'd be able to work with them is usually at the end of the day. So I've worked with many, many that they have a quiet office at the end of the day. Most people have left the office, and that's when we do our session. And it's also great to be in that environment to help carry over what it is we're working on, whether it's a presentation or talking to their boss or, whatever these situations are. And they'd be leaving work to travel and go to a session. And this makes it a little more convenient.
absolutely. So I think it's just kind of reiterating and reminding folks of that.
Mhm. One gentleman I think of, he actually was really wanting to bring his boss into the session. So his boss jumped on our Zoom from his
Perfect.
office
Yeah,
and we had a three-way conversation about it because the boss he was all about including and supporting this individual. And I mean, you can't beat it. And there's not
no,
a way we could have done that
exactly.
otherwise.
No, I think that's great, meeting them in their environment. That's going to help with carryover and generalization, which is always, I think, the hardest part for all of us when we're doing those one-on-one. Okay, how are we going to get this out into the real world where you're using it? So I think it's really exciting.
Two other points I wanted to touch on is homework. I don't have a better word for it, and everybody knows what that word means, right? But I love virtual homework, whatever it is we've worked on, whether it's the whiteboard. I always save the whiteboard.
Yep.
We use shared Google Drive folders. They're all HIPAA compliant, everybody. Screenshots of what we've done on a YouTube video. I tend to document a lot on top of the
Mhm.
YouTube page or whatever it is we're looking at. So it helps them reinforce
Yeah.
and practice and carry over at home. And that's always an expectation. And then, oh, I wanted to touch on virtual communities, especially for
Yes.
adults, because they become so isolated
Yes.
over time for lots of different reasons. But something like virtual connections, if we've worked with them in therapy, accessing online, now they can use those same skills and broaden their communication with a variety of other people across the world, whether they're on National Aphasia Association, one of those conversation groups, virtual connections. It just opens up their world.
It really does. And I will thank you for mentioning that, because we do have groups where we can pull everybody together and they create these friendships with folks that they are in therapy with, and that can carry over. And we wouldn't be able to have that if we weren't online using, the telehealth. So it's
Because
amazing.
we're not limited to geography. They no
Exactly.
longer, if they're have had a recent stroke, and maybe there's a waiting list at outpatient. Maybe they need someone that has more specialties, and now that opens up the access with telehealth. Again, preaching to the choir. So let's wrap up our section, Remy. Alyssa, I know you also work with adults. Do you have any input, anything else you'd like to add to this?
No, I really like what you said about how we're able to capture more adult clients that maybe would have fallen through the cracks, being able to capture them on their lunch break. Really quick, they want to work on some fluency, articulation, public professional speaking, anything like that. And they don't have to drive somewhere. So we're able to kind of capture some other demographics who might not be able to attend that traditional in-person model. But I think you covered it all. That was great.
Wonderful. Okay, Remy, why don't you wrap us up with the key benefits for adults for teletherapy?
Okay, sounds good. Well, again, just so similar. There are so many benefits, but I think some of the things that we can really kind of drive home is that, yeah, it's therapy from home or from work. So there's less effort, there's less stress, there's more ability and flexibility that way. No travel time, which again is huge because some of our folks can't travel. Or at the end of the day, they want to go home. They don't want to go to yet another appointment. We can engage our family members. We create an environment where there's more generalization. And of course, it's just that real time feedback, and we can provide homework, the bad the bad homework, but I think they're more apt to do it because it is fun. It's things that are applicable to their lives.
We're not giving worksheets. I mean, not
No, we're
knocking
not.
worksheets, but sometimes they don't see how it's relevant. But yet we can still reach our goals working on whatever language, speech, with whatever we worked on the internet. Okay, so let's open this last part up to all. Let's just wrap this up. Any final thoughts about driving awareness of teletherapy for both kids and adults? Who's going to jump in first? I'm going to pick somebody.
It's like we're in class now.
I know, right? That's exactly how that felt right there.
I think teletherapy, just as we've all been talking about, can be so functional because we are in real time in their environments that we wouldn't normally have access to under a traditional in-person model.
Love that.
And more frequent touch points with their communication partners, their caregivers, potentially even being able to pull in other people in their world that might not otherwise be able to be a part of a session.
Love that. Alyssa and Remy, any final thoughts?
I think that just COVID was the push to bring awareness to telehealth, but it's been around before that. But even since then, it's continuing to be developed and it's continuing to grow and it's continuing to have new research studies that show the efficacy, which I think is really great. So I love seeing that push from there.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I would agree. And I think right now we're only limited by our own creativity because
Mhm.
we have so much um, at our fingertips now.
That's right. So this is our first roundtable or whatever we're calling this, and we plan to do more of these. So for those of you in TSHA who are catching this video, we want your input. What is it that you need? Is it resources? Is it problem solving? Whatever it is, we are here to help provide that. Tell us what you need because we are working hard for you and us and all the clients that we serve. All right, team, this was great. Thanks so much.
Very nice. Thank
Thanks.
you.